Hey, Redcasters, be sure to subscribe to our channel and ring the bell to be notified about our latest videos. Go Big Red.
Welcome to the Go Big Redcast, the Husker Fan Sports Show.
Welcome, everybody, to a very special edition of the Go Big Redcast HuskHer Huddle, the NCAA volleyball tournament time. It is the greatest time of the year, in my opinion, because volleyball is the greatest sport of all time. And I am here with a very special guest. I'm Redcast Abbie, obviously, with a very special guest, Emily Ehman, who is a former volleyball player, the face of Big Ten volleyball. Thank you so much for coming on today, Emily.
Yeah, I'm excited to talk about it. And I agree. Best time of the year. I mean, the NCAA tournament for volleyball is so much fun and it gets better every year. So I'm happy to be here and dive into some things around the sport.
Can you believe it's like we're in postseason already? No, it went too fast.
Honestly, it's crazy because I even think going back to like media days in early August, and I genuinely feel like I blinked and somehow we've already gone through the entire season. And in a way, it feels like forever ago, but also it feels like yesterday in a way. There's been like I feel like I've lived 8 lives since August.
And you've been so busy. Like I don't want to be like, I remember the Stanford game, the Nebraska Stanford game, and just going into it thinking like, oh God, I don't know. It's going to be so, and then the feelings afterwards. And I look back, I'm like, that was
I know.
That was months ago. What? And you've been much busier flying around and doing and commentating on all these games. So I can't.
It's been a fun season. I actually went back and tracked my mileage this year because I think it was ahead of that Nebraska-Stanford match. And Stanford put out a social post and they were basically tracking all of their flights that they were taking through the season. And it ended up being like 30,000 miles or something crazy. So I actually ended up going through and tracking my mileage just for me either flying or driving to all these schools. And it basically came out to like 20,000 miles that I put on. And it's been a crazy season. I mean, during the regular season, it was 33 matches. I always say too, for me, it feels like I'm back in season, in essentially the same schedule that I had in college, except I don't have any home games. Like every match that I'm doing is in a away. So it feels the same in terms of prep, but the travel is definitely a lot more.
Yeah. Well, that's a great segue to, I think, what I want to ask first, which is, we know you, most people know you because of your wonderful work commentating. We love listening to you and your takes and getting to interview players and coaches. But you started as a volleyball player at Northwestern, correct?
Yep. Started as a player at Northwestern. I played there from 2016 and I graduated in 2020. And I had the absolute best time. I mean, I loved playing there. I loved playing for my head coach at the time, Shane Davis, who's now the Loyola men's coach. It was awesome. I mean, playing in the Big Ten was so special. You know, we got to go to these storied arenas with legendary programs every single night. And it was so much fun. I mean, we were really bad. We didn't win a lot of games, but it was so much fun. Like I remember the first time I stepped into Devaney being like, this is so cool that volleyball gets this, because that's not the case in many women's sports.
Yeah. I didn't play in college. I played in high school. Similarly, our high school team was not very good, but it was like, it almost didn't matter because you were just like, I just really like playing. And I get to go out and have fun with my friends a couple times, well, not a couple times, but you get to play a couple times a week. And it's like, I just want to do this. And so even now I just play like rec leagues. I'm like, I love it. I look forward to it. And I imagine it's that plus in college and then getting to cover it all. I'm so jealous of your life.
I will say, like, I tell people every day that my job is not a job. Like the fact that I get to just talk about volleyball and, I will say most of the job, everyone sees me on air or listens to me on air. And that's like a very small fraction of what this job is. Most of it is prep work, watching matches, talking to coaches, diving into film, looking at stats, all these other things. And the game part is the really fun part. Like I just get to go out there and, talk about these players, talk about the team, talk about the game that's unfolding. That's so special. Like, I've been playing since I was 10 years old and fell in love with the sport pretty much instantly, knowing that I wanted to play at the next level. But I didn't know I wanted to make a career out of it. That wasn't something that I ever anticipated, despite always wanting to be a broadcast journalist. I've known that since I was about 10 years old. I never knew it was going to be in volleyball though. So to be able to do this job that I've always aspired to do since I was very, very young, to do it around this sport that's so special to me and so special to so many other people is like, it's, again, it doesn't feel like a job because I'm just doing what I love every day.
How did you get into this job that you're in now?
Yeah, I always knew I wanted to be a broadcast journalist. I wanted to be a sports broadcaster since I was about 10 years old. So I made sure when I was going through recruiting, I only looked at schools that I knew had good journalism programs. So that was Northwestern, Cornell, Mizzou, Syracuse. Those were my targets for good journalism programs. I ended up at Northwestern, which was a dream school. I'm from Bloomington, Indiana, so it wasn't too far away. I had family in the area. So studied journalism there, had a lot of different internships throughout college. I think I had about 4 different ones. So I was like pretty active in, professional development, and it helped going to a school that was really helpful in that sense. And they really want to develop you professionally as well as, academically and athletically. And we were allowed to do internships, which was great. There's a lot of programs that don't allow that. And I was lucky enough to be at one that really focused on professional development. So I had a lot of experience when I graduated, but I didn't really have any hands-on broadcast experience because that was not something that you could really get at the college level. And when I graduated, it was a super fun time. It was March of 2020. So like best possible time to try to break into sports, right? Like perfect. There was no one hiring. Sports were canceled. So I was back living with my mom at the time. I was kind of going back and forth between moms and dads every month or so, just hanging out, doing whatever the heck we were doing during COVID.
Yeah,
I don't
doing 2020.
Yeah, we making sourdough and all of that. So doing all that, and I kind of realized I was applying for jobs, and obviously no jobs in sports existed, and jobs even around in broadcasting didn't really either around sports. So I kind of made it a point to say, okay, if I want to do this job, I need experience in it, and no one's hiring. So I need to kind of do it for myself. So I started a web show called Big Ten Volley Talk, and I would essentially just interview Big Ten volleyball athletes, alumni, coaches, anyone around the sport. So I would highlight them. I'd cut the video up. It was like 20, 30 minutes and just post them online and post like social clips throughout the week as well. And, from playing in the Big Ten, I knew that there was a really big volleyball followings that hadn't really been tapped into. At the time, I mean, the role of digital host didn't exist. There was no one highlighting these players or these teams in a way that was done online. And that was really the first time that had been done. So it ended up getting a pretty decent following right away. And I pitched that to volleyballmag.com to run as a digital series that we ended up expanding to all of NCAA. So I kind of started following the national scene during the fall of 2020. And again, started gaining kind of a volleyball following that winter of 2021, kind of begged Big Ten Network, who I had interned with prior, to put me on a match if they needed commentators. And I remember the first match I ever did was actually at Devaney in a completely empty arena. It was Maryland and Nebraska. And I remember I was basically going to pee my pants beforehand. I was so nervous, and I'm sure I was absolutely horrible. But they saw potential in me and ended up hiring me that next year to do more matches. But I started really just expanding my reach. I was doing the digital series for Volleyball Mag. I pitched myself to Athletes Unlimited to be a digital host for them. I pitched myself to Big Ten Network to be a digital host and cover volleyball for them. And then I just kept pitching myself and, saying, this is what I've been doing. This is where I think that I could add to your coverage. And this is why I'm the best person to do it. And I kept doing that with Big Ten Network, with ESPN, with Volleyball World, who I call professional volleyball for. So many different avenues that I kind of just started becoming the volleyball girl, which is exactly what I want to do. And I kind of decided, I would say 2 years ago, that I wanted to move away from other sports. I was at a place where I was doing sidelines for football and reporting on a bunch of other sports. I went to the Women's College World Series, went to a college football playoff. So many big events that were so fun to do and to follow and to cover. But my heart was with volleyball. And I was I would always rather be at a volleyball game. So I kind of just decided that I'm going to stay in this lane with the growth of the sport that's exploding. Now that's a job that I can do year round with professional volleyball in the US. And then in the summers, I've been covering VNL, Volleyball Nations League. So essentially a big tournament, similar like the World Cup, but it happens every year for volleyball. So I cover that. And because I'm able to do this year round, that kind of became exactly what I wanted to do. I never knew this was the path that I would go on. I always dreamed of being a sideline reporter or, a sports center host or things like that. The idea or the goal was never volleyball, and it kind of happened that way. And I also got lucky in a sense of the sport was exploding right when I graduated. The viewership is, exponentially higher and growing at a rate that I think is pretty unprecedented, especially for women's sports. The attendance records are falling left and right. So I got in it at a really good time. And also I decided this is what I want to do. I wanted to be the volleyball girl and market myself in that way and just continue to climb the ranks.
I think that's amazing. And you're right. You hopped in as it was rising. And that's, a question that we have I asked John Cook at Media Days about, we've seen this explosive growth, not just, in attendance records, but you're just seeing the talent explode all over the place. And because more and more kids are getting into it and all this. And I remember asking him, what do we have to do? Like, what can we do to help sustain this and keep it going? And he goes, we don't have to do anything. And I don't know that I completely agree. I think there's a lot of things we can continue to do, like airing the tournament on more rounds of the tournament on ESPN, even getting them on ESPN Plus is huge this year. But I'll ask you the same question. You've lived this growth. You're a part of this growth of women's sports and women's volleyball specifically. What do you think we need? We'll do general we in the population. What do we need to do to help sustain and potentially continue growing?
Yeah, it's a good question. There has been such a massive boom in not just volleyball, but really women's sports. And that's obviously for a number of reasons. I think, it helps that we've had star power. Like you think of Caitlin Clark, she's not only just brought eyes to women's basketball, she's brought eyes to women's sports in general, which I think is, can't go unnoticed. I think also just the fact that we know these players a lot better really helps. So the fact that these players are TikTok stars and all over Instagram and Twitter, and we feel like we know them on a personal level, that is massive. A lot of people that don't know the sport get brought in because they either, are a fan of that specific team or went to that university, or they just like the specific athlete. And that's what we see in other sports. For example, when LeBron went to the Lakers, a lot of now Laker fans were not Laker fans, they're LeBron fans, and coincidentally are now Laker fans. So there's that kind of star power aspect of people really like to follow individuals. And a lot of that is through, social media because they know them better. And I think one of the big things that we've been talking about, in the media for the last 2-3 years has been how do we build these volleyball players up as stars? It happens in every other sport. We see it in men's basketball and football and women's basketball. But what do we need to do to continue to build up these volleyball athletes as superstars? And so they go down as legends of the sport, because we have not done a good enough job of that. And I think, as media, that's been a really big focus for us of really highlighting these specific athletes and, not necessarily focusing on, I don't want to say not focusing on the coaches, but really building up these athletes because we want to hear from them. Not that we don't want to hear from coaches, because we do, but what can we do to elevate these women's voices and to get people to know them better, to tell their stories. We've seen that across the board, whether it's, national media writing stories on specific athletes or teams or documentaries. There's At the Net for Big Ten Network that focuses on every single school. And there's 1 or 2 feature stories that are put out. On ESPN side, there was a 60-minute documentary on Nebraska and following them last season in their path. There was a documentary on the streak for Penn State this year. It's been really cool to see the media do a better job of highlighting these athletes and stars, but I think we still need to do a better job of it, because that brings people in more. When you feel like you can know these athletes and know what they're going through and connect with them on a personal level, then you're bought more into the sport. The other side of that is, I think on the TV side, just continuing to push the envelope. And I will say, knowing the people behind the scenes who are at the charge of that. So essentially, the programming and coordinating producers at Big Ten Network and ESPN, because those are the 2 biggest networks right now that are driving that force. I would add Fox in there too now. But that's also essentially Big Ten Network because they own that network. I think the people in charge do a really, really good job. And it's also no coincidence that the coordinating producer at Big Ten Network, who's in charge of all volleyball coverage, along with the coordinating producer at ESPN, are both from Nebraska. So I think that explains it. Like, but I think it matters because those people, like, they grew up living and breathing that, and they understand how big volleyball is to some people. Because you could bring, a big time producer into a network, and all of a sudden the coverage starts lacking because they don't care. I think it is really important that those people are from an area that really understand volleyball. And that's been a really big push just to elevate the games more, whether that means putting a game that was on ESPNU to ESPN2, or a game that was on E2 to, ESPN, or getting more matches on TV, whether that's Big Ten Network, Fox, all these other networks, but just continuing to elevate the game in that way and really push the envelope. And I do think the people in charge have done a good job of that. And obviously us volleyball fans, like, we always want more, but the growth has been exponential over the last few seasons.
It has been amazing. We in our household, we're a very sports oriented household. My boyfriend writes for Sports Illustrated, so we have so many sports packages. But even before then, like, I made sure to get BTN Plus and ESPN Plus because it was like I knew every volleyball game that I wanted to watch was going to be on one of those two things. And the same can't be said. Like, I really like softball. There's so many preseason softball games I'll never get to see because it's not even that they're not on a network. They're just not being aired anywhere. Even some of our women's basketball games are like, oh, this is on. Never heard of this like TV deal, so I guess I can't watch them, and that's really upsetting. It is really nice as a Big Ten fan to have BTN and Big Ten Plus, and just the product is good. They've done a great job of getting the cameras are good, the angles are good, the commentators are good. It's all great, and it's just so impressive to see that. As a fan, I'm just like, this is great. We're so broken now. We're like, if they ever took that away, we wouldn't know what to do with ourselves.
And I completely agree. And I totally understand also the frustration of people being like, well, why do I have to watch these games through a paywall? Why can't I watch on cable? But when you think about, where this game is now versus 10 years ago, the number of matches on TV has doubled, if not tripled, if not quadrupled. The viewership is skyrocketed. I think from where we've been, like, the game is so much more visible and available than it ever has been. And like, you might have to pay $5 a month. Like, okay, to watch some great volleyball, that's awesome. And again, I think just having the fact that it is visible is great. And, the fact that the support is there and you can't turn away from the numbers anymore is fantastic.
Yeah. It's again, that if you air it, people will watch. And that's, and I think, I know women's basketball had a very similar growth, but I feel like you get to see it more in real time with volleyball because it's like it feels like kind of out of nowhere. All of a sudden it's like, do you see what happens when you let people watch? It's such a great, and again, not putting down any other, it's just such a fun, constant movement. There's always a point. It's just, I don't know. Again, bias. How do you not love it? How do you not love watching it?
I think that the difference for volleyball is that it's more similar to basketball than obviously like a football, but it's so fast. Like, there are 10 to 15 seconds between points. You don't have time to like go up and run to the bathroom. Like, I can do that in a football game and like go up and grab water and come back. There's 30, 45 seconds between plays. Where volleyball, it is so fast and every point is exciting. There's something that happens in every single play. And that's why it's fun. And you turn on the TV and you see these women that are so physical and powerful, yet so graceful and athletic. And like the balance of that, I think, is captivating to watch. And it's very unique to the sport.
Yeah. It's always so funny too, watching, again, having played high school volleyball, but against some girls who went on and played in college, where and you probably have seen this too, where people are like, well, it can't be that hard. It's like, I don't think you have any idea. Like, I really don't think you have any clue what this is like.
Yeah. I think, the players now, the players have just gotten like so much bigger and better too. I think back to even when I was playing, like, we weren't playing girls this big, and it was like 5 years ago. And like, it didn't feel like they were hitting this hard. It's pretty crazy to watch, like the athleticism and just like dominance that we see at this level. I cannot believe it.
I love it. It makes me so happy. And even as a shorty who would never have made it, I'm just like, great, just keep going, bigger and better. Let's go.
Yep. I'm with you.
Oh, well, that's great. So I keep looking over. I'm sorry. We've got Loyola Chicago and BYU have already started playing. And this will get into one of my questions for you about this volleyball tournament. We'll skip my first one since Loyola College is currently leading a 5 seed BYU.
Oh.
It's 1-0. It's 15, 16, 14, according to mine. So we've got some potential upset. I know it's early. It's okay. I get excited.
Loyola took down Dayton to win the A10. They swept them, and Dayton was a top 10 or top 15 team at that point. So this is why volleyball is fun, because there's so much parity now. Like, you just really never know what's going to happen. Tournament time, I think in years past, like, it's pretty much a lot of it has been all chalk. But I'm looking at like some of the first and second round matchups, and like they're really fun.
So speaking of, who do you think is going to be your first? Who do you think is the first upset this season or this tournament?
This tournament, I'd have to look at like specific days when they're playing, but I think TCU Hawaii for me is one to watch. I think Hawaii does just such a phenomenal job, and they are, led by one of the greatest coaches. They're a team that's like always very feisty. I think it'll be really fun for TCU to watch Melanie Parra go up against Kaylin Alexander. They're two players that average over 5 kills a set. I actually picked Hawaii to win that, not for like any reason other than I feel like they're a good team that people sleep on. That's definitely one that I'm looking at. Other than that, I think in the first round, UNI Illinois is definitely one to watch. Illinois was one of the last teams into the tournament. Illinois is one of the best players, I think, in the league, which is Raina Terry. She is a physical force. If UNI doesn't serve tough enough, I think Illinois could definitely grit out that upset too. But I'm excited. I mean, there's also some really fun second round matchups that we could potentially see that I'm excited about. I mean, you just mentioned BYU. I'm excited to watch BYU and Purdue potentially get after it. Kentucky, Minnesota. There's just a few that I'm like, these are like sneaky going to be really fun matchups.
Which is, and you're so good at this, Emily, without even knowing, you've kind of led into my next question. You're excellent. Do you have a Cinderella team this year?
Ooh, good question. I think, honestly, I feel like there's a few dark horse teams that I feel like could make a bigger run than we think. I mean, at the top, I wouldn't call them necessarily Cinderella teams, but I think an SMU is a team that's you need to keep your eye on. They're the only team to have taken down Pitt and Nebraska this season. They've proven that they can not only hang, but beat some of those top teams. So of the top group, about the top 10, I would say they're definitely a dark horse team that I wouldn't be shocked to see make a Final Four. I'd also throw Creighton in there, even though they're a top 5 team. I think people sleep on them just because we don't see a lot of them. So maybe you don't know about Creighton, but they are a phenomenal team led by who I think is like the most athletic player in the country, and their setter Kendra Waite. In terms of lesser teams that are either seated a little bit lower, I would say, honestly, Minnesota is a team to watch. They came in as a 6 seed, and they've already took down Texas, which was when Texas was ranked number 1, coming off back-to-back championships. So they've already proven that they don't really care about the name on a jersey. They'll play a team hard. They beat Wisconsin earlier this season in a 5-set win. And I think they're a team to watch because, to me, I think they can hang and potentially beat some of the top teams. It just depends on how they're playing and how they're rolling, but they finished the season strong. And I wouldn't be surprised to see them make kind of a deeper run. We'll likely see them play Kentucky in the second round. And I honestly wouldn't be shocked to see Minnesota get that upset.
I love it. It's so hard it's like you said, it's so hard to know because the tournament just brings out the best in all of these players. Like they're already so good, but they know it's like, this is it, guys. This is on the line. And you're just going to see the best volleyball I think we've seen all season, which is hard to believe.
Totally. And to your point, I think, when you look down the line too, you see a Texas team that's a 3 seed, and that's a team that's coming off of back-to-back national championships that has Maddie Skinner, who, is one of the best players in the country. The numbers haven't really reflected it this season, but we saw last season what she could do in the tournament. I mean, she was exponentially better than she was during the regular season, and she completely willed Texas to a national title. And that's a team that I would not want to see. I wouldn't be surprised to make a Final Four, just because those players know what it takes to get there. And to me, a tournament experience becomes really important down the line.
Yeah, and I remember thinking that in the national championship, after getting over how sad I was with that national championship game, just the whole time being like, no, was just, again, even then, how experienced that Texas team was. And you had it against a Nebraska team that didn't have any seniors. We had a couple players with some deep tournament experience, but I mean, I just think like the youthfulness is great. And I think you look at like Penn State where they're not like they are a youthful team, but they have seniors. You know, Jess Merzick is feels like Jess Merzick has been playing forever. She's so good, but I'm like, how many? Like, oh my gosh! But how much deep tournament experience do they have? And I think that's going to be really interesting to see how that kind of mindset plays off, because I think, like I said, that youth is good, and you're like, great, I'm here, I'm ready. But I think this causes teams to have to dig a lot deeper, I think, than maybe they're used to or they're expecting to when they get into those, you know, in the final four in the championship.
100%. And I think, you know, Nebraska was a good example of that. Like their almost entire starting lineup was freshmen last season. They go to the national championship. It's really different when you're playing in a Final Four. Like there's so much that goes on aside from just playing in that match, you know, the fanfare and the media that you do. And like, it's honestly for the players watching them go through like a car wash for 3 days straight. Like it's very overwhelming for these players. And so you have that on top of the most high pressure situation that you've ever been in your entire life. And you're expected to be just as good as you were the whole season. And especially for freshmen, they're not used to playing past November. Like maybe they play a week into November, you know, some states, maybe you go 2 weeks, but like that's a month tacked on. That is so difficult for these players to sustain that high level of play for, you know, 4 months straight. It's very, very hard. So when you have teams and players that have done that, it adds so much. For example, Pitt's a team that's made 3 straight Final Fours. They have a lot of the same pieces, pretty much all the same pieces that they've had over, you know, a decent amount of that time. But from last year to this year, they're returning essentially their entire starting lineup except a freshman middle who's new this season, who has been outstanding. So, you know, to me, that plays a factor in it. Like they've been consistently playing into late December for the past 3 seasons. These players are used to it and they know what it takes to be in a Final Four. They know what to expect for the outside noise as well. And to me, that is a really big difference maker when you go deep into it.
Yeah, I agree. And so that's it again kind of leads into what I have. So I have your Elite 8 here, your Elite 8 teams. I'm going to ask, what do they need to do to win? So what is maybe 1 or 2 things each team needs to do to win? And we'll start with Pitt versus SMU. You have Pitt winning that, but what does SMU need to do to win that game?
To be honest, the biggest thing for Pitt is they don't have a lot of holes. So for SMU, they're going to have to play as clean as possible. They actually beat Pitt. They were the only team to beat Pitt during the regular season. When they did that, it was because Olivia Babcock had a pretty bad night, Pitt's right side. So honestly, it sounds bad, but you got to hope that Pitt's having an off night if you want to beat them. And you got to hope that Babcock's having a bit of an off night. But if not, you need to be able to control everyone else. So, okay, maybe Babcock gets her kills, but you can't also let Tori Stafford go off, making the offense a little bit more predictable. So SMU has to serve incredibly tough against a very good passing team of Pitt, and then control their side of the net, limit errors as much as possible, but also keep the pressure on Pitt. And then I would say on the flip side, SMU is a very pin-heavy offense. So Pitt's, you know, outsides and right side blockers have to do a really good job of being disciplined on their block and not allowing that offense to go off. And SMU setter Celia Cullen is so athletic that even if you get her on the move and make the offense more predictable, she's great at putting the ball in a good location. So how well can you defend out of system? That's going to be another key for Pitt. And then, you know, just playing Pitt volleyball, like they need to find a way to just continue to do what they've been doing and not have some of those dips.
Okay, like it. Louisville, Stanford. You picked Stanford in that one.
I did.
Rematch, right? For those two.
Yeah, I mean, it'll be part 3 of that rematch potentially, which honestly, like, I know people had gripes with how the tournament and the bracket were put together, but I think what people don't realize is from seeds 1 through 16, which is really seeds 1 through 4, those teams are automatically placed wherever they fall on the overall seeding. So the people who made the bracket, the selection committee wasn't just putting these teams in places where they're like, oh, we could get this matchup, it'd be fun. Oh, this is good for ratings. They're automatically seeded there. And the way that they did their seedings 1 through 16, I completely agreed with. I think I didn't really have any notes or question marks. The way that they weighed things differently. So, you know, people weren't happy that we're getting all these rematches, Pitt, SMU, Nebraska, Wisconsin, potentially, Louisville, Stanford, potentially. But like, that's kind of just how the seeding played out. And to me, they got it right. For this matchup specifically, it'll be the third time they're playing this season. Louisville won the first one, Stanford won the second, and the most recent one being last weekend, Stanford won in 4 sets. They were very close. I think the key to beating Louisville runs a 6-2, meaning they always have 3 attackers front row. So that block's also a little bit bigger. Stanford's outsides have to do a good job against what they know is going to be a really big block up there, being aggressive. And that's going to be Ipar Kurt and Elia Rubin, 2 very good and capable outsides, but they need to play, they need to play fearless up there. And when they're out of system, can they still take big swings against this Louisville team? I will say also getting the middle involved is going to be key for Stanford. That's Lizzie Andrew and Sammy Francis, 2 very capable and really good offensive middles. They need to do a good job of keeping them involved. Stanford has really lacked their block from time to time this year. They started off the season and it was like just completely non-existent and atrocious. They got better, but that block has to be there against a 6-2 because you've got 3 hitters at all times. Your block has to be disciplined and good. On Louisville's side of the net, I think it becomes, okay, how aggressive can we be against Stanford? Can we get them out of system? Stanford setter Kami Minor is one of the best in the country. So get her on the move as much as possible. When she's in the backcourt, get the ball on her as much as possible. That's going to be key for Louisville. And then keeping that offense somewhat balanced, staying in system at a high clip, getting their middles involved, not becoming too dependent on their outsides, Anna DeVere and Charity Looper. That's going to be really big for them too. And for Louisville, honestly, it's like defending your home court. They have the opportunity to play 6 straight matches in Louisville if they keep winning. So, does that add kind of an added flair to this game of, Louisville's protecting their home court? If they win this Elite 8 matchup, that sends them to the national semis that are in Louisville. So they kind of have that added chip of like, okay, we want to continue to play at home. And for a player like Anna DeVere, who's from Louisville, I mean, she's even got more reason to want to go off. And I personally would never want to play Anna DeVere when she wants to go off, because that seems like game over to me.
Yeah. I remember, like, I've watched them play. Obviously, we played them, and then I've watched them play because of their coach, because of Danny.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. When she's on, Anna DeVere is unstoppable. She's so good. And I think, I don't want to say she's under, but I think
I want the game to be over now, and just decides, and then she just goes off.
I feel like it was one of their matches against Pitt where I was just like, oh, she's just going to win this game herself. Like, she's just going to go ahead and take this. And it was like, she just about did. And it's like, she is, I think, a little bit underrated by a lot of people, just because I don't think that they maybe think of Louisville or think of her, but she's going to be so fun to watch in this tournament.
And again, it's that just like added want of like staying at home. And for her, she's in her 5th season. She's done after this year. So, playing hard for that as well. For a Louisville team that's made multiple Final Fours in the last few seasons. I don't know. I ended up picking Stanford just because I feel like at their best, to me, Stanford's a better team. But also we've seen Stanford falter for the past 2 seasons. They've lost in the Elite 8 to go to the Final Four. And that's a program that expects to be in a Final Four every year with the pedigree that they have and winning the most national championships of any program. So they do have those expectations. And I think this is the best Stanford team over the last, 2 years, I would say, to potentially get there. Most like well-rounded.
Yeah, they'll be fun to watch. All right, next one is Penn State and Texas. You took Penn State over the reigning back-to-back national champs.
Yeah, a big part of that was because they're going to be playing Penn State's going to be playing at home. I think Rec Hall is one of the toughest environments to play in. When they're playing a good team, it is so deafening in there. It is hard to it's hard to think. I ended up picking Penn State just because I feel like they have the best team as a whole. I think Texas has faltered from the beginning of the season until now. Like, we've seen so many different lineups. They've been so many switches. They started in a 5-1, went to a 6-2, back in a 5-1. I think they just have more question marks to me. That being said, like, I would never want to play Maddie Skinner in a tournament. That seems like absolutely terrifying. She has the ability to completely take over. For Penn State, the biggest thing is going to be controlling Skinner. If Skinner is playing in an Elite 8 matchup, she's going to want to go off and completely take control of the match, and they cannot let her do that. The second thing I think which is more, I guess, not really a physical thing, but to me, I think it's going to be a question of like, can Izzy Stark, Penn State's freshman setter, can she stay grounded in this big moment? Can she rise to the occasion and not get scared of this being an Elite Eight and playing, Texas, who was coming off back-to-back championships? Can she stay in her game plan and not let the moment get too big? To me, that's going to be something to watch. And then just in general, I mean, when they get their middles involved, they're really tough to stop. Taylor Trammell is very underrated as a middle for that team. But I really think just in the conference in the country, like she's so good and doesn't get enough recognition. And when Stark can get her going, she's phenomenal. So getting Trammell going, getting Mendelson going as well is big. On Texas's side, if they serve really tough, Penn State becomes very predictable. Everything's going outside. Justin Merzik is a phenomenal outside attacker. But Texas's block is pretty big. So can they limit the outsides and defend well out of system, because Texas is a very good serving team. And then also, like, if Maddie Skinner wants to go off, feed her the ball, wherever she's on the court, just get her the ball. I think, to be honest, if you want to win that matchup, it feels like a player like Skinner is going to have to really step up.
Yeah. That, again, another one who, when she's on, it's just terrifying.
Terrifying.
Just terrifying to watch. As an opponent, you're like, oh no.
Yep. Totally.
Yeah. All right. Last one, Nebraska, Wisconsin.
Dear God, I hope we get this matchup. Like
I'm torn. I want it, and I'm also like, 3 times in one season.
No, to be honest, I think if I were a fan of either team, I would not want this matchup at all. Like, it's fun for us in the media to talk about. Like, I am thrilled. Like, you couldn't have written it better, to me, to be honest. All these regional matchups. I think it's going to be really fun because it is very difficult to beat a team 3 times in a season. That being said, we've seen Nebraska really rise to the occasion multiple times this year in really big environments. I think back to the match that they played in Madison. There were a lot of question marks of how they were going to do in that environment, because the end of last season, the only regular season match that Nebraska lost, it was in Madison. They got swept because the environment was too loud. The moment was too big for them, which I actually think was probably a good thing for them that they didn't go into the postseason undefeated, but doesn't matter, whatever. A lot of the same players. I think what Nebraska did really well the first 2 times they played Wisconsin that they need to do in a third time potentially is their pins cannot be afraid of the block. When you have a 6'7", 6'9" blocker in front of you, Harper Murray and Taylor Landfair need to swing big at it. They can't get timid. When they struggled, it was only because they were timid at the block and roll shotting it right in. They need to stay aggressive. I thought Murray did a great job both matchups, just swinging for the fences up there. That's going to be big for Nebraska. Serving tough is definitely the second thing. Wisconsin has been not tinkering. They've had some injuries to their back row players. So their libero Lola Schumacher and Gulje Guchtikin, who were like pinnacles of their back row. Gulje Guchtikin has been out for about a month. Schumacher has been back in 3 rotations. We'll see how they come out in the first 2 rounds. But it's going to be really key for Nebraska to serve them tough. And honestly, I think they need to keep the ball off Franklin because she's the best passer in the gym. Keep it off her. Just worry about her attacking, serving them tough. The outside's got to swing hard. And then I think what they did really, really well the first 2 matchups was Nebraska blocked the heck out of them. I mean, they were so dialed into the game plan, which I think was huge. Like in every situation, the blockers knew exactly where Charlie Furbringer was setting, and that was huge. And after that, I mean, Wisconsin just made a crazy amount of errors and essentially not like handed Nebraska the game, but Nebraska made it so difficult for them to put a ball down. So that blocking piece is going to be big because we know Nebraska's defense in the backcourt is going to be great, but can the front court kind of live up to that as well? For Wisconsin side, I think it's one of the biggest pieces is because the connections are so much better than the first 2 times they made, like, can they keep that consistent? Even if it's not good passes, can Furbringer still get her hitters in a situation out of system that's good? So I think playing well out of system is going to be big. Like, can the outsides put a ball down? And same as Nebraska, like not be afraid of the big block in front of them because, both right sides, Mara Beeson's a phenomenal blocker. Bergen Riley is a pretty good blocker as well. Can those outsides do well out of system? And I think for Wisconsin, I think just leaning into their physicality, like they need to block better than they did for the first two. Like if you have a wall up front that they have, those blocking numbers need to be where they are against Nebraska, the same way they are against, an Iowa or a Rutgers or whoever they're playing. The block needs to be better and not get tooled as much than that they had for the first few matchups. And I think, again, it's difficult to beat a team 3 times. So not letting that kind of get to them of like, oh, well, they've had our number the last 2 times we met them. They need to go like, hey, this is a completely new slate. Both head coaches actually talk a lot about there's a new season that starts when the tournament starts. So this is completely different than from what we saw a month ago. Like these teams are different. The game plan's different. What they're running is different. They need to be good in this moment and not think about the last 2 matchups that they had.
That's it. No big deal. You can do it.
A lot of things for all these teams. Those are things that I'm looking at, I guess.
Yeah. No, that's great. Again, you watch so much volleyball and you do so much studying and prep work on all this. So I love it. I love to know because I think a lot of people have it penciled in that it's going to be Pitt, Nebraska. And I mean, my God, I don't mean to sound like as a bad fan. I am so surprised that so many people think Nebraska is going to win. Because it's kind of like, have you watched Pitt though? Like, okay.
No,
I'm not going to admit that I'm lying, guys. I'm 100% behind Nebraska, but it to me a little bit surprising of just like, I don't know. But so it's nice to hear like, what are the keys? Like, what do other teams need to do? What do they need to work on to maybe get to that point too?
Yeah. I think I agree with your Pitt Nebraska sentiment. I think, Pitt's been the number 1 team most of the season. Nebraska slid in there. And obviously Nebraska has incredible wins. They are a very, very good team. Mm-hmm. To me, I've seen pretty much every top 6. I think the only team I haven't seen is Kansas. I've seen all these teams live. To me, Pitt is just leaps and bounds better than every other team this year. Like they don't have any holes unless you catch them on a bad night, which like rarely ever happens. They're going to be a really difficult team to beat. Olivia Babcock to me is the best opposite right now to come through the college game. I think she's going to end as the greatest opposite to ever come through. And she has the potential to potentially, play on the Olympic team for LA in 2028. She is a phenomenal player. It is very difficult to catch her on an off night. And if she decides that she wants to take over a match, both from the service line and up front, Pitt is like nearly impossible to beat.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. It's not a fear. As Nebraska fans, we've sat through what I feel like was maybe the worst match that I've ever watched. And that was last year's national championship game. So it's so a little bit of that. I will say like, I'm kind of like, well, can't be worse than that. But I've seen that a lot where like the overwhelming majority of fans who put together brackets have picked Nebraska. And for me, I just want to be like, let's not disrespect what Pitt's doing because they're all season. They're just, they're phenomenal. Nebraska, when they're at their best, is phenomenal. It just feels like Pitt has been at their best longer.
Well, part of it too is like Nebraska's right now the most well-known volleyball program, hands down. Like there's not even a close second. They have the most fans, the most rabid fans that are of course going to pick Nebraska to win. Where Pitt has one of the reasons they're not picking Pitt is because although Pitt has made 3 straight Final Fours, it doesn't really matter because they're not a blue blood of volleyball. They've never won a national championship. They hadn't even made a Final Four up until a few years ago. Nebraska's won 5 national championships. They've, been in 2 of the last 3 national championship matches. This is a program that is storied, that people know about, that has also just had a lot of coverage over the last, season and a half. We know these players so well. People don't know Pitt very well. They probably haven't watched them. You hear about them, but I think it's easy to pick a team that you know more about and that you watch more than a team that doesn't have as much recognition and you just aren't as familiar with.
Yeah. I'm hoping this changes that
Me too.
For all of them. I hope people get to see Pitt and are just as impressed with everything.
They're so fun. Like they're a joy to watch. They're so much fun. And, I'm just excited for people to see these teams on a bigger stage and people that maybe don't even watch volleyball. Like, especially when we get deeper into the tournament, these matchups are so much fun. And it's just fun to see new people. Even like I have friends that'll turn it on, be like, this is so much fun. And I'm like, I know I've been trying to tell you this is my whole life.
Oh, I know. I had so many friends who were so I live in St. Louis. So there are some Nebraska fans here. We're everywhere. But not a ton, not really obviously as many as when I lived in Omaha. But I have friends who know I'm a Nebraska fan. And so after that championship, they were just like, oh, you guys are playing for a championship game? I'll watch. And so it's like, no, please don't. No. Now looking back, I'm like, I'm glad you watched. I'm so happy you watched. And now they're like, yeah, we'll watch again this year when the tournament comes out. I'm like, perfect. That's great. I love it. And it is. It's just like, guys, it is so fun. And it is at a level that like I said earlier, it's just people don't understand the speed, the strength, they make it look so effortless, and how actually not effortless it is. It is so much work to do, but to make it look that easy means you're doing it so well. So I'm hoping all these teams get more of that in the next year. When it comes on, we get even higher TV rankings, because I just want everyone to watch it. I just want everyone to love volleyball the way I do.
And again, I mean, these execs are doing a good job of putting these matches on platforms where people will watch and the viewership is following. So only trending up.
I love it. Well, so that's it for our tournament questions that I had for the tournament. If you've got a couple minutes, I think it might be fun to once again do a little bit, let people get to know you a little bit better. If you're cool, we'll do like some rapid fire questions.
Let's do it.
Okay, great. What's your biggest volleyball ick?
Biggest volleyball ick is players who wear, which is so common now, players that wear their knee pads on their shins. I don't understand it. Like, even when I wore my knee pads on my knees, they were still completely destroyed. So like, I don't know how these players even have knees, because they're wearing them on their shins during matches. I do not understand it.
It is the same. You put that on Twitter. I agreed 100%. And every time I watch now, I just am like, you guys, your babies, your knees. I'm in my 30s, and I'm like, please pull your knee pads up. You don't understand how much you're going to need
knee replacement at 25. Like, what are we doing?
God. I don't get. And I've tried to look online, and they're just like, well, because you don't slide on your knees. And I was like, well, who doesn't slide on their knees?
I'm like, that's what they say. They're like, but we don't. And I'm like, but how are you diving? Like, I don't get it.
I don't know. I'm with you. I was really hoping you'd say that so I could agree with you.
Yeah.
It's so hard, because they're knee pads. They're not shin pads.
These kids.
It's our old people shaking our fists at the clouds. Where was your favorite place that you got to go visit or play as a player?
Ooh. I mean, again, we lost a lot. So like every match was just like not fun. I really liked playing at Minnesota. I thought the environment was really cool. One, I really like their arena. But like the fans are the perfect balance of knowledgeable and fun, and like not mean at all, but still like a really rowdy crowd. I always really liked playing at the PAV. That was always really fun.
Where do you wish you could have played?
Where do I wish I could have played? As in like where like an arena that I wish I could have played at, or like for a school?
Yeah, like either one. Like if you could go back and you get to pick an away game that you get to go play at, where would you pick? I mean, any team, any place cross country. Even
now, I've still never been to Texas. So I would love to go to Gregory and see that environment, because I've heard it's insane. I would love to go there. I would love to go to Hawaii. I mean, I've heard that they have one of the best atmospheres night in and night out. I think those two places would be fun. Now on the other side of things, I feel like I go to most of these big arenas, but yeah, Texas and Hawaii are two places I've never been that I would love to go to.
Okay. Who is your volleyball GOAT?
Oh, I mean, Jordan Larson, like that. It's just, there's not even like a 1A, 1B, like it's Jordan. And then it's just like everyone else. I mean, what she's done. Yeah, what she's done for the sport. I mean, the stamina it takes to win one medal in the Olympics, let alone 4, and continue playing. Like, I just, people talk about Tom Brady a lot, and like, he's won whatever 7 Super Bowls, blah, blah, blah. Like, and playing till he's 42. I don't even know how old he was. Like, that's Jordan, but she's doing it at a higher level and she's way better. Like, I think people don't realize how difficult it is to play at a high level for that long, and have your body like completely function. She's the GOAT, hands down.
I sometimes forget how old she is when she plays because she doesn't play like she's older. She's watching her play. You can kind of see a little bit. Obviously, we all do as we get older, but she still is out there, and you're just like, oh no, she's like 30, just out of college still. So I'm with you. She's such a joy to watch, and I don't know if you read the ESPN's, I think it's an ESPN story about it. And it's like you said, like getting to know them on another level, just again biasly makes you just love her even more and getting to hear her. And so there's going to be future ones, I'm sure, that when their stories come out, you're just like, oh man, we had no idea.
She's one of the best, and she's just I know her. We chat every time we go to Nebraska, and I covered her at Athletes Unlimited for a while, and I see her over the summer, and like she's just one of the best people. She always wants to sit down and chat and just hear what's going on in your life. Like she's just a joy. I love her so much.
I love that. I mean, we're so proud. We're so proud of her. And like, I remember as a child watching her and just being like, yeah, I could do that.
Yeah.
I can't do that. But I was like, I could do that if she could do that.
Yeah.
What is, in your opinion, the hardest position on the court to play?
Ooh, hardest position. I mean, it's definitely a setter. Like the things that you have to think about, you need to know exactly what's going on offensively and defensively. You have to know the game better than anyone. And, especially if you're on a team that's on a great passing team, like you're basically running a marathon every game. I think, their job is difficult. It's essentially like a quarterback in football. You have to know exactly what the defense is doing and make those split-second decisions to put your team in the best situation to succeed. And, you also have to have just a lot of finesse and fundamentals that, other positions don't have to have. I think, setter is definitely the hardest.
What does a libero have to do to win National Player of the Year?
Oh God. Like justice for liberos always. Like
always.
To be completely honest, like I don't think it's ever going to happen, which completely sucks. There are so many people that are so deserving. Like, for example, I think Lexi Rodriguez is hands down the best player in the country right now. Like she is the best at her position, and she is better than anyone right now at her position. She's not going to win National Player of the Year. She's probably not even going to be a finalist for it. But to me, I don't know what a player would have to do. I think you'd have to like break every dig number, which doesn't happen in the power conference level either. And like, for example, like Lexi Rodriguez's numbers dig wise are not as good as most of the other liberos in the country because people don't hit at her. Like you completely change your offense when you're playing her because you can't even hit to that half of the court. So I don't know. We're never going to get there. And that just makes me sad. But I will say I've had conversations with people from the ABCA, and I keep telling them like, you need to have setter of the year. You need to have libero of the year because those are two positions that do not get enough recognition for what they do. And I think we're going to see changes in the upcoming years.
That would be so great. Again, as a defensive specialist, a libero in high school, it's not a sexy position. It's not a glamorous position. You don't get this, you get cool stats, but you don't get the stats and the recognition that others do. So I've always been a just like justice for the littles. Please just like love on them. And so even like, was it Elena Scott? Am I getting her name right at Louisville?
Yep.
Another one of just like, we don't talk about her enough and we should because she is
absolute stud. Yeah. Stud.
So good. All right, fine. So we're not getting a libero National Player of the Year this year.
I wish we did.
No. I do love that the Big Ten switched from defensive player to libero of the year. I think that's really important. And
a much needed switch. It's also, we were the only conference that didn't do that. Like a middle, for example, like Raynell Jones a few years back by far led the nation in digs per set. Carter Booth led the nation last year. Like if you're going to lead the nation in digs per set and not win the award, it just needs to be a libero award because it's not going to happen then.
Yeah, I agree. All right. We've been on for almost an hour now. I really, really appreciate you coming on and talking about this. I think people learned a lot. I learned a lot. I'm with you. I love getting to talk about volleyball. Yeah. I annoy my boyfriend all the time because I'm like, volleyball's on, let's watch it. And I'll tell you about all this. And I just want to watch it. I'm like, no, but let me tell you. So I really love it. We got to do this for an hour.
I mean, I love it. Like I obviously live and breathe this sport. Any chance that I can to hop on and talk about it more and to, highlight these athletes and spotlight this sport, like I'm always down to do it. So I'm happy we had this conversation.
I'm so glad. So what we do typically here is we let our guests have a parting shot. So just one kind of message before we end the show. So Emily, what's your parting shot?
Oh, my parting shot, my message. I think my message would be, if you're a volleyball fan, or even if you're not, like, show up for these athletes. And that looks like different things, whether it's, getting an ESPN Plus subscription, getting a Big Ten Plus subscription, reading stories about these players, like following their journeys, being kind to them online. I think that's been a big topic over the last few weeks of, like, I just see crazy things online that are, posted at these athletes or at these teams that, like, are coming from people that can hide behind a screen and don't have a face and all of that. Like, just show up for these athletes, and, like, they're 18 to 22-year-olds. Like, they're very young people. They're on a pedestal that most of us can never even understand, and that we would never know exists. And they're dealing with a lot besides all of that. They're playing at the highest level. They're trying to graduate. They probably have other stuff going on in their personal life. They've got relationships. They've got friendships they're dealing with, maybe complicated family situations. Just, like, be kind, like, show up for them and just be kind.
I love that. I'm going to just second that. Be kind, watch volleyball, support these women in the most positive ways that you can, because why don't spend energy being negative. That's so unnecessary.
Yeah.
So I love it. That was a great parting shot. Thank you so much. Thank you to everybody who tuned in and will tune in the future. Emily, we'll try to get you on again. Maybe we'll kind of see what happens. We really, really appreciate it. And your call, you're going to be at the Final Fours, right? Are you calling those games? Okay.
My schedule is, I'll be calling a regional, to be determined which one right now. I'll leave it at that. I'm calling a regional. So that'll be Sweet 16 Elite 8 matches. And then for the Final Four national championship, I'm going to be doing studio at the desk on site. So I'm excited for that.
Awesome. If anybody isn't following Emily on Twitter, your handle is just at Emily Ehman. Follow her. You'll get to see, if you're a Big Ten fan, obviously you're going to see a lot of Big Ten content, but you're so good too about talking about the whole state of volleyball. So highly, highly recommend. And once again, thank you, Emily, for coming on, and thank everybody for listening.
Yeah, thank you. This was so much fun. I'm so glad we got to do it.
Me too. All right. If you want to hold on for a little bit after, we'll do our outro and then a quick debrief.
Perfect.
A Herd at Sports Network production.